Hey guys, welcome to Wildwood Studio. I'm Sarah, and in this video, I'm going to be making a custom Zelda-themed sketchbook with a wood-burned cover. This project is a gift for Adam. He's been making a lot of digital art lately, so I got him this little Canon Ivy printer for his birthday, and I thought it would be fun to make him a custom sticker book to go with it. Before I can burn on this book, it needs a wooden cover. Luckily, I already had this panel that's the exact dimensions I need for the two covers, and the surface is 1/8" basswood plywood, which is what I usually burn on. So, now I can just burn these and glue them onto the front and back covers of the book. Before we start, I just want to remind you that if you like this sort of content, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to be notified whenever I post a new video. So the first step after I cut and sanded my wood was drawing out my design for the book cover. Adam is a pretty big fan of the Zelda games, and I know that he likes the art style of Breath of the Wild, so I thought I'd do some characters and symbols from that game. I made the back cover fairly simple, just the Hylian crest, which I'm planning on burning all in one solid tone. For the front cover though, I wanted to have both Link and Zelda, and I thought that the logo from the games would look cool in the background. I drew this in my sketchbook first, because it's a lot easier to fix mistakes on paper than on wood. Once I had the pencil sketch, I went over it with my fine liner to make it easier to see and then transferred it onto the wood using tracing paper. You can of course also use graphite paper for this. Once I had both designs transferred onto the wood, I started by burning the Hylian crest on the back because I knew that it would be very quick. For this I did an outline using my knife tip pen since it's ideal for straight lines and gentle curves. Then I erased the pencil under my burning and shaded the whole shape with my spoon shader pen. People ask me fairly often about my temperature settings while I'm doing different things, and for this part I think I was working mostly between a 6 and an 8 on my razor tip burner. But temperature is really one of those things where it's really important to constantly adjust. So what I do is I start out low and raise the heat if it's taking too long or if it isn't dark enough, and lower it again if I find that I'm losing too much control of my lines or my shading. Burning the front cover was obviously more complex than the back cover, but I started with the easy part, which was the letters. For this I did the same method as the back. I outlined it with my knife tip pen and then shaded it with my spoon shader. For this part though, I didn't work too hard to make it one consistent tone. I thought it was more interesting if it had light and dark areas, so I let some parts be naturally lighter than others. After I was done the letters, I outlined Link and Zelda. For this I used my small round tip pen. I chose this pen instead of my knife tip because the shapes are a lot more complex, and this pen makes it easier to do all the small curves and little details. Normally I wouldn't do an outline at all for a person, but these guys are cartoons and I thought it would fit nicely with the aesthetic of the whole thing. By the way, for these two characters, I did pretty heavily use Zelda characters that I found online as references, so their poses and the way their clothing is and everything is from that and is not something that I made up. They were originally two separate drawings though, one of Link and one of Zelda, so I just arranged them in a way that I thought worked with the logo behind them. And I really like how it looks like they're standing together and their bodies are angled towards each other, but they've turned to face the viewer. The image of Link that I used as a reference also had his right hand visible holding an arrow, but I removed it because I thought that that part was looking too busy. Once I had the outlines done, I went back in and shaded the characters, and this is when I think it really started to come to life. And I did all of this shading with my spoon shader pen as well. While I was shading the folds in the clothes, I also put in some of the patterns that I had left out before because I didn't think they would look good with a hard outline. For example, the pattern on Zelda's belt and Link's sleeve. I did these freehand with the spoon shader, which made them look a lot softer than if I had outlined them first. At this point the burning was done, but I still felt like it was missing something. I liked the way the shading and the line work looked, but something about it was just too flat and samey, and I think it's because the characters are both pretty consistent in terms of tonal values, so they just weren't standing out the way that I wanted them to. One way to fix this would have been to go back in and make some areas darker, but I decided to add some color instead. To me, the most striking things about these characters are their blue eyes and blue tunics, so I thought that it could be interesting to add a bit of blue to make them pop, and to match the blue book that I'm going to attach these covers to. For this I used my Derwent watercolor pencil crayons, and I originally pulled out all 3 blues and the white, but I really only ended up using the one medium blue for their shirts and the same for their eyes, and a little bit of the darker blue at the tops of their irises. This worked because the shading was already all done with the burning, and I colored it very lightly so that the work underneath would still show through. Once I had colored it in with the pencils, I went over it with a paintbrush and some water to soften and blend it. The great thing about watercolor pencils is that you can layer them like watercolors, so I went back and forth a bit with the pencils and the brush. I love how smooth they look on the wood. I've definitely decided that this is my favorite medium for coloring wood burnings. Now the last thing to do for these burnings was give them a few coats of spray varnish and stick them to the covers of the sketchbook. I used this Varathane outdoor satin spray varnish because I like that it doesn't change the color of the wood, and I know that it won't smudge my watercolors the way that a brush-on varnish definitely would. So after 4 coats of that, I was ready to glue them onto the covers of the book. For this I had 2 options for adhesives, a contact cement and a 5-minute epoxy. I think both would work fine, but I decided to go with the contact cement. So I just taped off the part of the cover that I didn't want the glue on and took everything outside. Contact cements in general are fairly toxic and should only be used in a well-ventilated space with a respirator if possible. That makes it hard for me to do these sorts of projects in the winter since I live in a basement in Canada, but in the summer it's no problem, I can just go outside. Everything seemed to be going well, but of course, when I took the tape off, it tore the book cover underneath. The point of the masking tape was to keep the contact cement off the spine of the book, but it ended up just tearing the blue paper off with it. So that was a little frustrating, but to fix it, all that I had to do was mix up a bit of acrylic paint in the same color as the sketchbook, and paint over it, and now I think you can't really even see it. And finally, the book needed its first few stickers. So for this, I'm printing some of Adam's digital art. He's been drawing a lot lately, like I said before, and I really like the things he's come up with. So I started out the book with these pictures, and he can print the rest. And finally, here's the finished sketchbook. I'm really happy with this project overall, and I love that these burnings are on something practical that has a use, so maybe I'll do some more sketchbooks in the future. As always, please let me know what you think in the comments, and if you want to see more of my work, you can check out my Facebook page or follow me on Instagram. Also, please make sure to like this video if you haven't already, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss all my future art videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time!